Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'd like to start answering his question, but before that, I want to know how many people know about Napa Valley for wine. Almost everybody, okay. Well, what we are going to talk today, after listening to figures about the industry, we're going to talk about the fact that there is a history of tobacco in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is for cigars as Napa Valley is for wine in the world. And the reason why I took that concept is to develop in the few seconds that Mr. Martinez is going to give me to explore why these two industries, wine and cigars, should be looked upon with great interest on the side of the consumer. Both were started after prohibitions. 1933, prohibition in the United States, and that they took the prohibition away, and then the Valley of Napa started exploring with wines, bringing wines from France, from everywhere, and there you have Napa. Cigars in Nicaragua also were not produced intensively before 1933, which, by the way, coincides the dates, because Nicaragua, from 1926, while Nicaragua was occupied by the US forces, they installed a prohibition of tobacco production in Nicaragua. And what I'm going to say, not too many people know about it. It's in history, but it's real. It was thanks to a man called Augusto Cesar Sandino, who in 1933 was fighting in the mountains of Nicaragua, and he writes a letter to the then president of Nicaragua and said, we need to eliminate this prohibition because poverty is increasing in this country, particularly in the mountains of Nueva Segovia, because we do not let producers who know how to do it to produce what they know what to do. And he was able to eradicate that law through that pressure that he put to President Juan Bautista Sacasa, was the name of that president at that time. And that's how the industry of Nicaragua started very slowly. They start producing tobacco. In fact, there is a tobacco that this gentleman, Augusto Cesar Sandino, presented to the nation and said, you see, Kilali can produce wonderful tobaccos. And he called it tobacco from Bocay tobacco. And then that tobacco became Sandino's tobacco, okay? That's the initial part of the whole history. Before all these great gentlemen came down to Nicaragua, the families, you know, there is a history of tobacco in Nicaragua that has always, as in the Valley of Napa, been restricted. And what I wanted to bring this to today is to bring the attention to consumers and participants in this festival that we need your voice. We cannot allow that an industry like cigar manufacturing be restricted because FDA or because OMS or whoever wants to restrict a consumer good that is for satisfying your pleasure and not for habit. And I take that as an initial step because the next thing that I want to say about the history of tobaccos is that tobacco for Nicaragua has been the product with which we have been fighting poverty. So when you look at tobacco as cigars, please look at that angle. It's an instrument to get people out of poverty. That was said in 1933. In fact, at that time, in this country, there was a lot of interest in producing coffee, cattle, and so on. And it was that little guy in Nueva Segovia who opened the eyes and said, we need a program to reduce poverty. And the program should be tobacco and mining. Those were his thinkings at that time. The important thing today is that we want you to be awakened and to be aware that this industry, of which we can spend hours talking about it, is not at risk, because we are going to fight, as we have done in the past, to avoid any restrictions to cigar smoking, let alone cigar production. But being awakened as consumers is the most important part. And being aware that not only is smoke, through smoke you are creating jobs and you are creating better living conditions for people in Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Dominican Republic, in Mexico, and Brazil, and let me stop there, okay? So, thank you. I'm going to take too much time, sorry. I foresee a future of optimism, in spite of all the news that we hear about FDA in the United States, about OMS in Europe and in the world, you know. And I think it is going to become a new stage of development of the industry. And I think Nicaragua, the great success has not been because of the persons that we are sitting here, has been because we've been clever enough to understand that we cannot do things as we used to do it in the past. Once we learn that lesson, we can face the future with the belief that FDA might be a problem, but we are going to live with it. We wish we didn't have to go through there. Challenges, the opening of the US market to Cuba. This is a very polemic discussion, which I don't want to make it polemic, but to my opinion, the embargo should have been lifted years ago. It's taking too long. It's going to bring a tremendous challenge for all of us, particularly if what you are selling is something that you think resembles Cuba. But if you sell Nicaragua, I've been in the market, and I said my company had been in the market, and is today in 57 countries with distributors. And there, our major competition is Cuba, and we are doing well. Why we're not going to move in the direction to make it possible that even if we have a Cuban tobacco in the shops in the United States, that we are going to suffer? Oh, obviously, there is going to be a transition, and it might be painful at the beginning, but people are going to see the differences, that we have two different products. Here you have your wine from Napa or your wine from France. Choose it. Let the consumer choose it. And we open our eyes to say, how am I going to compete? Rather than say, continue maintaining that embargo, which doesn't make sense, okay? Obviously, I don't want to get into politics at this moment. I just want to say my feeling of how I see the future with a tremendous challenge. And I think if we have been seeing growth of 10% per annum minimum in this industry for the last 10 years, I can presume that it's going to be bigger. People are investing in the fields. We are investing in our factories. So there is no reason from the production side that we could not grow. And from the demand side, I think it's a matter of learning how to deal with all those obstacles they put against us. We wish they did not exist, but we have to try to see how we can make our own niche of markets without thinking that the end is going to come because FDA or because OMS is obstructive. I always ask the question, who would ever think that marijuana would become legal in some states in the United States? Had you asked somebody 5 years ago, they would say, no, that is never going to happen. So if marijuana can be, and tobacco has nothing to do with the marijuana thing, but what I'm bringing it just to bring the issue that we have to look positively, optimistically to the future.